Hello and welcome. Donald Woods and I are here again to look at another historic milestone on the chessboard. In our 4 programs so far, we've already seen games involving the giants of the game in the 19th century, like Morphy, Steinitz, Zukertort, and Chigorin. As the century draws to a close, we visit pre-revolutionary Russia. In 1896, the Russian master, Mikhail Chigorin, invited leading players to participate in a multi-round tournament here in St. Petersburg, the cultural capital and religious center of Tsarist Russia. Chigorin himself was regarded as a likely victor, of course, but the field included the top players: ex-world champion Wilhelm Steinitz, now nearing 60, the current world champion Emanuel Lasker, and the young American star Harry Pillsbury. Lasker was born in Prussia in 1868 and established his reputation in tournaments and match play in Germany, England, and the United States in a burst of activity from 1889 to 1893. His astounding breakthrough came in the World Championship match of 1894 against the old warhorse Steinitz. He took the title with 10 wins, 4 draws, and 5 losses. The following year, Lasker played in the inaugural Hastings tournament, the strongest chess competition ever held up to that time. With 3 rounds to go, the youthful world champion led the field, which included Steinitz and Chigorin. Lasker was, however, recuperating from a severe case of typhoid fever and was overtaken by Harry Pillsbury, the American who was making his first appearance on the international circuit. No one had ever won such an event at their first attempt. But after St. Petersburg, Lasker continued to notch up a sensational series of victories, first in Nuremberg that same year, in London in 1899, and Paris in 1900, often competing alongside his cousin Edward, also an accomplished player. Perhaps he now found chess too simple and withdrew temporarily from active play to the study of mathematics and philosophy. But in 1908 he returned to the fray, defending his world title against in turn Tarrasch, Schlechter, Marshall, and Janowski, a string of formidable opponents. His last great tournament win as champion came when he returned to St. Petersburg in 1914. The Great War served to undermine Lasker's financial resources and his health, and in 1921 he lost the title to the young Cuban Capablanca in Havana. Sadly, Lasker failed to win a single game in this his last championship appearance. But he had held the title for 27 years, and no one has ever matched this achievement. The advent of the Nazis in Germany forced Lasker, a Jew by birth, into exile, and he travelled the tournament circuit once again in order to make a living. His results were still outstanding. He died in New York in 1941. The game I have chosen was played in the 10th round at St. Petersburg. This was the true test. Lasker faced the victor of Hastings and had to prove that he, and not Pillsbury, was the real world champion. At the halfway stage, Pillsbury had been a point clear of the field, but around this time it is believed that he discovered he had contracted syphilis and his morale collapsed. But Pillsbury was capable of astonishing feats of mental exertion. He was one of the great American geniuses who sadly failed to fulfill his true potential. One of his specialities was to play 12 games of chess, 6 games of drafts, and a hand of duplicate whist simultaneously. He would also memorize a series of 30 incredibly obscure words, then write them out and repeat them verbally in sequence, first forwards and then backwards. The list included words such as antiphlogistin, staphylococcus, and salmagundi. All this must have represented a considerable strain on his brain. In 1904, at Cambridge Springs, Pillsbury achieved the worst tournament result of his life. In the following year, he tried to kill himself by jumping from the 4th floor of the Philadelphia Presbyterian Hospital during, as the local Evening Bulletin recorded, a period of temporary insanity. He was subdued by staff at the hospital, but by 1906, at the tragically early age of 34, he was dead.
Pillsbury sounds a fascinating character.
Yes, he was. And this list of words he was memorizing is quite incredible.
I thought you handled those well, but he should have tried 2 of my favorite words, Xhosa. One is, let's see, Akikila or Mangatega.
And what does this mean? Nelson Mandela for president?
Well, you could say so. But I like his notion, too, of playing simultaneous, what was it, chess, drafts, and whist.
Whist, yeah.
I once tried simultaneous chess and Scrabble on the clock, and wanted to try chess, Scrabble, and golf on the clock.
chess, Scrabble, and golf.
That would be a nice challenge.
You had to take a portable chess set
That's
round.
right.
Well, Pillsbury may have had a few party tricks up his sleeve off the chessboard, but on the chessboard he was a really serious character, as we'll see now from this game. Pillsbury was white, Lasker black, and Pillsbury kicked off with this move, pawn to d4. Now, those of you who followed our series so far will note that this is the first time that this move has appeared in our great games. Nowadays, of course, it's quite common. Garry Kasparov, for example, the world champion, has it as one of his absolute favourites. But in 1896, they were still working out the theory of the Queen's Gambit, which is what Lasker invited with his next move. Pillsbury played this, c4, offering the Queen's Gambit. Black could take it, but White can easily get the pawn back.
You've made the point that's not a real gambit.
It's not a real gambit. White can get the pawn back at one. It's not like the King's Gambit. It's really just a position.
A neo-gambit.
A neo-gambit, yes. It's a strategic way of putting pressure on the centre. And this is the most common reply, which Lasker chose. And out jumps the White Knight. Lasker makes the most natural defence. And now, after 100 years of investigation into this opening, we know that probably the best move is bishop g5. And I say probably advisedly, because in 100 years' time, they may have decided that the best move is something entirely different.
A disaster.
But this is the kind of move that Kasparov and the modern grandmasters choose. They put immediate pressure on the black knight, they pin the knight, they prepare, in some cases, to drop the bishop back to here and even to here, where it operates both on the king's flank and against the black queen's flank. Bishop g5 is the move that we play now. But in 1896, they hadn't elaborated the theory of this quite so precisely, hardly surprisingly, and Pillsbury chose this. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not quite as sharp as bishop g5. Do you ever play the Queen's Gambit, Donald?
No, I don't like it.
You like the King's Indian, don't you?
I love the King's Indian. I'm a King's Indian fanatic.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're following the footsteps of Kasparov again, because when he's black, he nearly always plays the King's Indian.
I'm in good company.
That's right. So, back in the Queen's Gambit here, 100 years ago, and Lasker struck back in the centre. And the positions are now more or less in equilibrium. The fact that White hasn't played quite as accurately as he could has allowed Black to get in the game without too many disadvantages and maintain parity in the centre with his pawns. And now, at long last, Pillsbury played the move bishop g5. But perhaps not so effective here because Black can start to clear the centre. And Lasker took off. Pawn takes pawn on d4. And Pillsbury, who was an aggressive person, took back with the queen. He could also take with the knight. But putting the queen in the middle, the most powerful piece, bang in the centre of the board, was very much in Pillsbury's style. The knight hops out, attacking the queen, and the queen leaps over here, augmenting the pin against the black knight on f6. And Lasker parried that with bishop e7. And here, on the 8th move, very early indeed, White castled queenside.
Well, at this stage, wouldn't you say White's in a pretty strong position?
Yes, it's very interesting.
I mean, more than just satisfactory.
Yeah, and it looks pretty good for White. His pieces are more or less in play. He's got his queen in an aggressive situation. He's already castled. The rook's operating in the centre of the board.
He's on the way.
Black looks in some danger, yes. But it's very interesting that in the games we've seen so far, first 4 games, the attack has always triumphed. The player who gets the attack wins the game. Now, what we're going to see here is the birth of something new, really, at top-level chess. It's the fact that the counter-attack can also have its say in the game. And although White's position looks dominating now, Black's position is not without resources. And it's these hidden resources that Lasker was an absolute genius at exploiting. I mean, I think the position is still probably in equilibrium. Both sides have their chances, both sides have their possibilities. But Lasker was exceptionally good in positions where the opponent was trying to attack him and he could strike back.
But I think to the average club player, if you offered him the board as it is now, he would go for White.
I'm not saying I wouldn't either, Donald. What Lasker did was to play the queen here. And you see, Donald, the point of that is that the rook was on the same file as the queen. He wants to get out of the way.
Bad news, yes.
But also he's thinking that the queen might also attack the white king. So already Lasker's thinking in terms of counterattack. And now this little move, which allows the white bishop to come into the game. And Lasker played this. And you can see here that there's a kind of hangover from the Steinitzian lesson that we learnt last week, that although White's castle queenside already, he's already committed his king, Black is waiting. He's waiting with his king. Not so much because he's got ideas of attacking against the white king. This is still way in the future. But he is thinking, maybe I shall castle queenside too. Maybe I shall castle kingside. I don't know.
Keep the option.
Yes. But first of all, I'm going to develop the bishop and see and wait. Just get my pieces out and keep them flexible. And Pillsbury made a very good, sensible, safe, precautionary move. He moves his king one square to the left. And this means that the pawn on a2 is defended in case the knight on c3 has to somehow move into the attack. It's a useful thing to do.
That's actually a characteristic of very good chess players from time to time. If the average players are looking at diagrams, is often what appears to be to the ordinary player a rather obscure king move. Seems to be an anticipation of the need to get him off that square well ahead of time.
Yes, it can be useful both for attack and for defense. Yes, I mean the move is attacking in the sense that it liberates the knight, and defensive in that it defends the white pawn on a2. And often these little moves are so crucial to the further conduct of the game. They're storing up energy for some future explosion. And Lasker now, as we see so often, puts the question to the white bishop. Now, it's a kind of sham attack, because Black isn't threatening to play h6 takes g5, because the white queen would zap the rook on h8, absolutely. So there isn't an immediate threat, but for the future, there's this niggling thought that White must sooner or later decide what to do with the bishop on g5. And Pillsbury kicks off by trading pawns in the center of the board. And Black, not unnaturally, recaptures. And now he advances his knight, placing it on a very strong central square. It's a position where the knight can't be molested by black pawns. It's a good solid square for the knight. And now, at long last, Lasker decides that castling kingside is the right thing to do. And now, of course, there's a threat. Now that the rook's moved from the h8 square, the threat is to play
take
h6.
The bishop. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And would you be tempted perhaps to sacrifice the bishop, Donald? Is that the sort of thing that happens in your game?
I certainly wouldn't, Trey. No, I certainly wouldn't. I'd get right out of the area.
Well, in fact, Pillsbury didn't sacrifice the bishop, but sacrificing the bishop must have occurred to him, because it strips away all the pawns around the black king, and Lasker must have had to calculate that very carefully before deciding
whether it's worth it,
whether he could castle or not. And another move that's worth considering is moving the bishop here. But probably he was scared that now the black bishop on e7 is somehow in line with the white queen, and this could be annoying. So after Black move, what Pillsbury did was to eliminate a defender. He took it off. And, of course, Black must take back with the bishop. Taking with the pawn doesn't even come into consideration.
Now those bishops, both those diagonals.
And the white queen came to h5. I'm looking at the position now. We can see that White's in a very aggressive position still. He's got a lateral sideways attack against the black pawn on d5. And the queen is also hovering menacingly around the black king. So I think Pillsbury must still have been thinking that good things were going to happen in this position. Also, there's another threat. He's got the threat of perhaps moving his knight away to here, attacking the black queen, and now the white knight on c3, the rook, and the queen all hit the pawn on d5. And don't forget that Pillsbury was leading this tournament, Donald. He must have been feeling pretty confident at this stage in terms of his chessboard prowess. And I think he probably felt he had the initiative here.
He'd tend to be thinking more positively at this stage.
Well, Lasker really has no choice. He has to trade off this dangerous knight before it goes to b3, for example, as I showed. And white, of course, has to take back. And the pawn on d5 is attacked. Lasker must defend it. And now, on the 16th move, white starts to bring up his reserves. f4.
Well, now.
Looks like white's got an attack stall, doesn't it, Donald?
Yes, indeed.
I mean, the one threat is to push the pawn onto f5.
Yes.
Very dangerous. Yes. And then another threat, not to be underestimated at all, is to put the pawn on g4.
Yes.
Supported by the pawn on f4, and go to g5. Yes. And just blast away at those defences around the black king.
Well, that looks to me fine, but I know from experience and the look on your face that that's bad news for him, isn't it?
No, f4 is the move of someone who thinks he's winning.
That's right.
Pillsbury thinks he's winning. And this is, as I said before, now we start to see the real contribution this game makes to the science and art of chess. That a man who's been under pressure the whole time, traditionally up to this point in chess, the man under pressure, the man being attacked, usually crumpled. And if he won, it was because the other man overpressed his attack. It was very unusual for someone to deliberately invite the attack, knowing in his own mind he had a sufficient counterattack that would blow it away. And what we see now is something quite extraordinary and remarkable. And it's a game, what Lasker now does, even now, having played over the game 100 times, I still find it difficult to see how a man could have invented the amazing conceptions that now come. And he starts with this, rook to c8. Does it answer the threat?
No.
No. And Pillsbury played it. He pushed on the pawn. And Lasker sacrifices rook for knight. Now, Pillsbury didn't like the idea of taking that back, because when the black queen captures on c3, something like this.
Yes, it's very, very exposed.
His king is dreadfully exposed. Yes. He didn't like that. And one can understand that. So let's put the pieces back. What he played was this move. Pawn takes bishop. So material's still equal, but white is prosecuting vigorously his own attack against the black king. And you'll see that the very aggressive pawn on e6. The bishop on f1 is going to come to d3 in a minute. And the black rook on c3 is still attacked.
Yes.
And now Lasker plays a move. I mean, I just can't believe what he does now. It's so utterly incredible. Pillsbury must have fallen out of his chair when he played this next move. He played his rook from c3 to a3. What a move.
Yes, it's extraordinary.
Pillsbury refused to take the rook. The person saying, no, you are going to take my rook. I am forcing you to take my rook. What can he do? The threat is to take the pawn here.
Often you hear of a poisoned rook.
A poisoned rook. He's threatening to break through like this and just smash white beyond belief. So
something's got to happen.
Yes. Well, Pillsbury, I mean, he doesn't have any choice. But first of all, I think he wanted to show he still had some free will in this game. He took off here. He takes f7 check. And black took back. Rook takes f7. And now he has no choice. He must take off the rook. And the queen goes here, check. Now, if the white king tries to escape on the c file, the black rook can come across to c7, check. And white will be hounded to his doom.
And a is horrible.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if the white king goes into the corner like this, black can play bishop takes pawn on d4 check. And ultimately the queen and the rook combine to force mate. But Pillsbury still thought he had a defence. Remember, he's a whole rook up. So what he does is he sticks this bishop in the way. This is a brilliant defence. I mean, one of the things that makes this game so wonderful is the incredible depth of Pillsbury's resistance, that he's also finding tip-top moves.
Why is he feeding that bishop, or does he have no choice?
Well, the point is that when black takes it, check, and he now moves the king in the corner,
Oh, then he's
deflected the queen.
That's right, from that dive.
From the d4 pawn.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
An amazing piece of defense.
Yes.
But now the attack. Now Lasker isn't a rook down anymore. He's got a bishop for a rook. So this isn't quite such a heavy material deficit. He plays this: rook c7, bringing over the piece for the attack. And Pillsbury starts to defend like crazy. He's going to reinforce that d4 pawn. If he can hold the d4 pawn, he may still hold the game. And up comes the rook to c4. Pillsbury defends staunchly. And now, having got the rooks where he wants them, passive, Lasker plays this. Rook c3. And you see the incredible thing that this rook is following the path of the previous rook. The previous rook was also on this square. Now the other one is taking the same path. Yes. Well, Pillsbury tried to get his queen back to the defence. And the black queen came in here, increasing the pressure. And now up comes the king to defend the pawn at a3. Now, you remember what I said about this rook treading the path of its fellow?
Yes.
And how black had first of all sacrificed one rook on c3. It was declined. It went to a3.
a3.
Accepted. Now, what does the man do? This man is a genius. He plays rook takes a3.
He does it again.
Yeah. He does it again. Rook takes a3. Pillsbury throws in a check, and the king goes here. And he could check again here, but it wouldn't make any difference. The king could go to h8. Doesn't help.
I thought of that, because he can't keep checking.
No, he can't keep checking. Now the rook the threats are enormous. He has to take. He plays king takes a3, and I'm just so amazed at the way that black has put both rooks through the same path, sacrificed them both, and now white has two rooks for a bishop, but the final attack is devastating. Queen c3, check. And watch closely how this happens. King goes to a4. And the pawn goes to b5.
He's just pulled over, whether he wants to or not. He's just pulled over further.
It's like a magnet.
Yes.
It's like a huge magnet dragging the king. He must take the pawn. King takes b5. And the magnet effect gets worse. Queen here, check. The king has to go.
I can't, yes.
a5. And now, in a sense, although it's fairly obvious, the most subtle move of the game, this bishop just slides back to such an insignificant looking square, check. And look at it, the king that was so safe. Remember we were saying a few moves ago when white was attacking on move 10.
Absolutely imprisoned.
The king was making the safety move, king b1. Now it's driven up to here. Oh, these brilliant moves, this wonderful copycat series of rook sacrifices. And I know he hated to play this move, but he has no choice. He has to play this. Queen b6. And now black has a pleasant choice. But in fact, he played a takes b6, and the white king is kaput. And really, of the games we've seen so far in this series, this is the most fantastic, the most incredible.
Yes, if you called that over the phone, say 5, 6 moves ago, maybe even 7 moves ago, or you got to the stage where he's 2 rooks, queen, he's up against queen, bishop, call that over the phone to someone to adjudicate. They'd laugh at you.
Yeah.
And then you see what happens.
Well, thank you, Donald, for helping me go through this game tonight. Next week, we're in Russia again on the eve of the Great War to see yet another thunderbolt thrown, this time by the first Latin American chess superstar, Jose Capablanca. His match against the Ukrainian Osip Bernstein is next week's centerpiece. Do join us for that. For now, from Donald and me and the Thames Chess team, goodbye.